When you make a plan in your organization, are you making that plan with certainty or with clarity? One of those two is good, but often misunderstood, and the other is a trap that holds you back. We'll talk about both of those today, and in the end, we'll talk about what this has to do with community engagement efforts. When you're building new plans for your organization, what you want to achieve is clarity. So let's talk about what clarity is. Clarity means that your organization has a plan, first of all. You've sat down and determined how a new project or a new initiative will fit within your mission and your overall strategic goals for the organization. But here's the thing, most plans that organizations initiate don't actually achieve the level of clarity that is needed. A lot of times when an organization achieves clarity around a plan, it's truly because an external force is coming in and putting some pressure on the organization to build that plan. And that external pressure could look like the opportunity to pitch a proposal to somebody who might invest in it. That might look like a regulatory or compliance requirement, or an auditor coming in asking you to do something a little bit different in the way that you're operating. Or if you're a nonprofit, it may look like a big grant opportunity, or for small businesses, a big contract with a new client. Those external moments are drivers of clarity because they force a real need for clarity. How do you know when your organization has achieved a clear plan, not just a plan on paper? When you have a clear plan, you have a plan that you can answer solid questions about. You can back that plan up with data and numbers. You can provide projections and show the sources of where you got the information from, why you're making the assumptions that you're making, and why you believe the plan that you are about to launch is going to work. You aren't afraid to answer hard questions about that plan because you're confident that that plan has been pressure tested. You've subjected it to the perspectives of people within and without the organization who may not agree or may have a different perspective. And you can really provide a clear picture of where that plan is going. A lot of plans actually live in the world of enthusiasm and excitement. And that doesn't mean that plans don't connect with strategic goals. That's why clarity in planning is often misunderstood, because when you have thought through this idea, you've built a concept around it, you've sketched out how it's going to work, and you can clearly articulate how this plan is going to support where you hope the organization goes a year from now, 3 years from now, or 5 years from now. There's a connection, a clear connection in your mind that you see around that plan. What's missing when a plan lacks clarity is those very concrete pieces of research, that very concrete numbers or figures or assumptions that have gone into that plan that back up the beliefs that you have around why this plan is going to actually move your organization forward. A plan can actually tie to a strategic plan without being clear. So clarity is something that a lot of people misunderstand. Too many times, concepts are mistaken for clarity. Again, as I've said, a plan can attach to your strategic plan and even make a lot of sense without being clear, without being really thoroughly vetted and thought through. Building a plan that has true clarity in it is what creates sustainability for the work that you're trying to do. It's what keeps it from getting dumped 6 months to a year from now when something changes. If you're going to go through the effort of planning to launch something, you want to have results from it. Part of the reason some of these plans live in that idea or concept phase is because that fear of putting too much effort in and it not working out. But the reality is the process of putting in that rigorous effort in creating the plan and thinking it through is what reduces the risk and creates the sustainability and increases the likelihood that the plan is going to work as you intend it to. Maybe not exactly in the real world, exactly the way you thought it would go, because unexpected circumstances often come up internally and externally. But understanding exactly how the plan is going to work is what actually makes it work. Clarity is the goal. However, clarity and certainty are two things that can often get confused, and certainty is what you're not aiming to achieve in your strategic planning processes. It's actually the opposite. And the need for certainty happens for a lot of reasons within an organization. Some of that need for certainty comes from control or fear, or just even requirements and pressure from stakeholders to have all of your I's dotted and T's crossed before you move your plan forward. What does waiting for the need for certainty often look like in an organization? It's commonly referred to as analysis paralysis, or where you're thinking too much about all of the possible outcomes or all of the possible scenarios that you get stuck and you don't actually move anything forward. You can identify this need for certainty happening when you have a plan that's taking much longer than you originally intended to execute. You're seeing deadlines get pushed back, or you're still talking about that thing that you're going to do a year or two later without actually having built any traction around it. The pitfall of certainty happens when that need for clarity moves into the area of seeking control over circumstances. As an organization, as an individual, as a leader, you're never going to have complete control over every circumstance. Certainty can look like that layer of clarity. It can look like adding one more data point, or doing one more market research interview, or modeling one more scenario. All of those elements live in the world of what it takes to build a clear plan. And you do want to have a clear plan. Clarity has the room to become a delay tactic. And certainty is never guaranteed. What causes these two traps, and that first trap is clarity is not a trap, but that idea of confusing concept for clarity is. So what causes these two scenarios? And the first one being not that clarity is bad, or that not that clarity is the goal, but that organizations often confuse a concept of an idea or enthusiasm for an idea for clarity around an idea. And then on the other hand, what causes the need for certainty? What happens that makes clarity, when you have a clear plan, become a control tactic that delays the actual launch of the work that you're intending to do? These two scenarios are situational. They're not personality traits. So it's not something that you are doing as a person that's causing one of these two traps, although some of this can be personality driven. This can be personality driven, for example, when somebody really likes research and data analysis. They might lean into that need for certainty a little bit more heavily because they enjoy the process of seeking clarity. They enjoy the process of doing the market research and uncovering the data and doing the modeling. And some people are just built more for that back end, process driven, figuring out how things work than the front end taking action or doing the marketing or more external facing actions that are required to move the organization and to move the action forward. So that need for clarity versus certainty can be a little bit personality driven, but these two stages happen most commonly based on organization type and structure. Where I see this happening quite a bit is smaller organizations tend to mistake that concept for clarity. And sometimes this happens because it's called taking action, having faith, moving things forward. Is often modeled in a way in which that concept, or just building a minimum viable product and getting something out there, is a good thing. There are moments and there are circumstances where that's necessary. However, in smaller organizations that don't have a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot of, but as many resources or as many tools to do all the layers of data research and modeling and analysis, sometimes a lot of plans live in that concept area. And when that happens, you sometimes fall into the trap of adding more work on top of extra work, because there's a pressure to move things forward without burdening the organization with the process-driven, clarity-seeking actions. On the other hand, large organizations can often fall into that trap of needing to seek certainty. And that could be because sometimes that certainty seeking is truly a standard operating procedure. There may actually be a procedure built in around that organization, around all of the things that need to happen before a plan launches. There's layers of bureaucracy, there's more need for buy-in and approvals, and so all of those layers bring in additional questions that need to be answered, and things don't move forward because the organization has to go through all of these processes before launching something new. And a fair point for organizations of either size, leaders fall into this concept-driven mistake, as well as the mistake for seeking too much control through certainty, because they're responsible for a lot of things. If you're a leader listening to this, you have a whole group of stakeholders that care about the results that your organization is bringing forward. That doesn't mean these stakeholders are shareholders, but sometimes it does. Sometimes it's a board of directors. Sometimes it's the payroll that your organization has to meet. There are many external pressures that, as a leader, you want to make sure you're getting things right. And so in the process of trying to get things right, you may find yourself falling into a tendency of mistaking enthusiasm for clarity around a project, or into the mistake of working too hard to make sure that you have everything under control, so much so that things don't move forward in an organization. The goal state for any type of new initiative is to build a plan or a project that moves forward sustainably. And again, talking about two different types of organizational structures, this might look very differently. Sustainability can mean two different things depending on the organizational type and size. In a smaller organization, sustainability might truly mean building a project or plan that doesn't overwhelm the staff or deprioritize other important elements of the work that needs to get done in the organization. In a larger organization, sustainability might look like building project awareness and developing something that isn't siloed within a particular department but becomes part of the organizational culture. In either case, what sustainability looks like is building a plan that has a process behind it that somebody else could be trained on with the proper amount of time and resources. The plan is actually one that can be repeated and executed regardless of who is owning the plan at that given time. So what's the best way to make sure that your organization is moving forward in building clear plans that are going to be sustainable for its intentions? First of all, set realistic timelines for that plan. Contingency planning is always really important, but really do that contingency planning and think through what it would take to launch this particular initiative or project forward well, to the best possible degree that you could. Building the clarity around where the project's going to go. But it's also important to think, okay, if this project takes me twice as long as I intend it to, if this doesn't get launched for a year instead of 6 months, do I still care about this initiative or project a year from now? If the answer turns out to be no, then it's possible this project wasn't a good fit in the first place. But if the answer is yes, if this project is going to take me 1 year instead of 6 months, 3 years instead of 1 year, and I still think it's important enough to my organization's strategic goals to move it forward regardless, then it's time to start building. So that second step for moving forward is to build in processes for steady movement. That could look like a monthly meeting on a calendar. That could look like a goal to reach out to a stakeholder on a monthly basis. That could look like an action step or a build that needs to happen in a particular time frame. That steady process could actually look like some of that clarity-seeking process. Doing the market research, doing the modeling. Those are some of the action steps that can be part of that steady movement in moving the project forward. Of course, with the caution that there is a time to stop and recognize you have enough information to keep things going. And then third of all, the final step in building a sustainable, clear plan is to bring in stakeholder perspective. And it's common for companies not to want to announce a product or project too early or before it's too certain. There's good reasons for that. But test the concept with stakeholders, get the feedback around what they think, and involve layers of stakeholders in that early research project. It will bring in valuable insights that you wouldn't have otherwise and make that project plan that much stronger once you decide to actually move forward with it. Finally, what does this have to do with community engagement? Well, first of all, community engagement is part of that stakeholder perspective capturing. Clarity comes from community engagement, from getting outside of your bubble and incorporating a wide range of perspectives in that planning process. Community engagement is core to building a clear strategic plan. Your work and your world does not live in a vacuum. It lives in a world where all sorts of people are interacting with it, and bringing in that engagement process early is important to building the sustainable plan. And then second of all, this is especially important in community engagement efforts because so many times organizations see community engagement work as a soft skill. And so community engagement efforts are the ones that often live in that concept or underdeveloped phase. That too often, community engagement efforts don't get the proper planning and due diligence processes that are dedicated to other areas of an organization, because in that soft skill relationship space, it feels like something that doesn't have a return to the organization. But that's not true. A strong community engagement plan can be a real driver of your organizational growth and reputation in the community. I work with organizations to help them get their community engagement efforts right. Certainty is never guaranteed, but clarity is the goal. Like and subscribe to follow along for more. If you want more information about Profound Hope Industries work, there's a link in the chat. Thanks for watching.